Hunter Biden has been indicted by the so-called Department of Justice by Biden's people, David Weiss and his crew, the same people who botched the entire plea deal operation, got put in charge of executing this deal, and we're going to go through it. But now the indictment has hit the docket, and Hunter has been charged with crimes. Now, there are some comments and questions that we have about this new indictment. Does this even encompass even 0.5% of the criminality of the Biden crime family? Is Hunter going to be booked, going to have a mugshot? And we've got a lot of other questions as well. But we've got reaction from the Oversight Committee, from Donald Trump, from Vivek, and James Comer got a letter from Hunter's lawyer before we hear what Joe Biden has to say about this new indictment, all coming up. But first, let's see what the indictment actually says, and then we've got some questions to unpack all of this. It's not a long indictment. They only save those for their political enemies. This is 4 pages. You see, it is filed in the District of Delaware, and we're asking ourselves about these case numbers and what case this is going to be a part of, because remember, we originally, before we got here, we had a criminal information, and we had 2 buckets of crimes. We had the tax crimes and the gun crimes, and we had a plea deal where the actual plea deal was never entered, but we also had a diversion deal that Hunter's lawyers argue was in effect, and Hunter's lawyers, as we're going to see here, are going to argue that this whole thing is invalid because Hunter is already immune. But we're in the same court, we're in one of the same case numbers, and it is here the indictment of the president's son. And my friends, this is a historic day. You know, if we were on CNN here, I'd have red banners all over the place, and we'd have a bunch of guests here crying about the death of American democracy or whatever. A president's son has been indicted. If this was their political enemy, I mean, they're not doing that now, but if this were like, imagine if this were, let's say, Don Jr. Oh my gosh, there'd be fireworks out there, you know, celebrating, but also mourning simultaneously. But we do have to pause here. I mean, my gosh, the president's son, what a criminal. Can you believe him? Just committing crimes. And Joe Biden said that he didn't do anything wrong, and he said that he's the smartest man he knows. And so look, if they're going to rub our noses in it, then we're going to rub their noses in it. I can't believe this has happened in America. I am shocked and saddened for the future of democracy. I feel like the whole country is coming to an end because Biden's corrupt DOJ. You get the point. All right, enough of that from me. But here is the actual indictment. And I do think this is really significant. I mean, this will go down in the record books. We don't often see members of the first family indicted, but this is a scam indictment because this is just one minute fraction of what actually should be charged here. And we're going to see here how I think that they're just going to use this for their own ends. Like, this is not a prosecution that's going to lead to actual justice that is imparted upon Hunter at all, right? This is all just legal gimmickry in order to paper over what they want to do. So here's what the indictment says. The introduction and the background, they say, at times material to this indictment, Company 1, located in Wilmington, possessed a federal firearms license and was authorized to deal firearms. Okay, we got a gun store. FFL license holders are licensed, among other things, to sell firearms and ammunition, and in order to comply with their license, they got to follow the law. Great. The rules and regulations governing these holders of the right to sell firearms is that they have to follow a form process. ATF Form 4473. Part of the form requires the prospective purchaser to certify that all of their answers are true and correct. So if you've ever purchased a firearm before, you know, you've got to fill out forms, and they've got to be filled out accurately, and you sign at the bottom, this is true under penalty of perjury and the things, so that they can do a background check on you and make sure that you're good to go. They vet you and then decide what to do about it. So on question 11E, and they're saying that the gun sales company, right, the people who have the license, have to follow the rules. Question 11E of the form requires that the prospective purchaser, in this case, Hunty, certify truthfully that he or she is not an unlawful user of or addicted to any stimulant, narcotic drug, or other controlled substance. In the certification section of the form, the actual buyer, the person buying the firearm, must certify that his or her answers to the question on the form are, quote, true, correct, and complete. The actual buyer, Hunty, must also acknowledge by his or her signature the following, quote, I understand that a person who answers yes to question 11E is prohibited from purchasing or receiving a firearm. So if you're going down the list, and it is just like a list, like at the doctors, do any of these things apply to you? No, 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 no. Unless you're Hunter. He should have stopped at 11E and said, ugh. But he knows that if he marks yes to 11E and he tells the gun shop owner, sorry, I'm a crackhead. Sorry about that. He's going to say, well, I can't sell you a firearm, cracky. Get out of here. So he just flipped that over to the no box. Nobody's going to check this thing anyways. So saying that making any false, he's acknowledging, making any false or written statement is a crime punishable as a felony under the federal law, and it may also violate state or local law. And so they say that the firearms license holders are required by law to maintain a record in the form of a completed form of the identity of the actual buyer sold to them, including the home address and the date of birth, right? So the firearm store's got a copy of the thing, and we'll certainly see a copy of that in discovery. So with all of that being true, that is the status of the law. The government says the following: signed by foreperson of the grand jury and brought forward by the two bonehead lawyers, so-called prosecutors, David Hines and Leo Weiss, the same people, mind you, who screwed up the first part of this entire case. They created the plea deal with blanket immunity tucked away in the diversion, and they're the same people in charge of this. It's like, take your job, and whatever you do, you violate the total standard of care and cause a complete catastrophe in your company or wherever you work that you should have known better about, everybody knows better about, and is basically due to sheer negligence, incompetence, or corruption. And then after you've done that thing that wrecks the entire project, they say, well, guess we better give you a promotion, and we're going to give you a bigger job. Now you got to do the whole prosecution as well. You couldn't do the pre-investigation portion of this, the pre-filing part of the criminal case, but we're going to give you the actual filing and the prosecution of the case as well. It's insane. So they are still on the case, signed by Derek Hines and David Weiss, the same guy who either lied to us or Merrick Garland lied to us, is now appointed, look at this, as special counsel. Give me a break. They told us that he had all the powers of a special counsel before, and now they just made it official, so now he can file charges, right? The whole thing's a scam. All right, so back up to the counts. Here is what they tell us. Paragraphs 1 through 5 are realleged on or about October 12, 2018 in Delaware. Hunter, in connection with the acquisition of a firearm, a Colt Cobra 38 SPL revolver with serial number RA 551363 from Company 1, licensed under the law, Hunter knowingly made a false and fictitious written statement, criminal, intended and likely to deceive that dealer with respect to a fact material to the lawfulness of the sale under the law. Lied on the form. What a criminal. Here, Hunter provided a written statement on the form certifying that he was not an unlawful user of and addicted to any stimulant, narcotic drug, or controlled substance, when in fact, Hunty knew that statement was false and fictitious because he's a crackhead. Count 2. On or about October 12th, same date, same firearm, he knowingly made a false statement that he was not an unlawful user and addicted to any stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance, and that statement was false as well. So basically 2 different parts on the form. You know, I marked the box and then I signed somewhere else that it's true, and he knew that both of those markings were false. Count 3, on or about October 12, 2018, knowing that he was an unlawful user and addicted to any stimulant, he did knowingly possess the firearm with the revolver serial number, and he had the firearm shipped and transported in interstate commerce. Ooh. So it sounds like illegal arms trafficking. If Donald Trump had done this, it would have been probably a RICO act for illegal arms trafficking or something like that. Terrorism charges as well, for colluding with Putin. So this was, very minor, and there's questions about this charge. Okay, there's actual questions about the constitutionality of this. You'll notice that these top 2 charges are about the form. He filled out the form illegally. It promised, I swear, knowingly made a false statement and a representation with respect to the information required there that he was not an unlawful user, right? Mark the form twice. So you lied on a form, but then being in possession, there's a question about gun rights on this. There's a question of if you use a narcotic drug, they say you cannot possess a gun. That's a constitutional thing. Well, we'll see about that. And I'm sure that's going to go up to the Supreme Court, and we'll see if this is a valid law or not at some point. So this might actually, legally, as a matter of gun rights, go away. We'll see. Now, these other 2 charges, okay, lying on a form, this is like 0.5% of what Hunter Biden has been involved in. If you want to learn more about that and read some of his other criminality. And again, just Hunter's criminality, not Joe Biden's at all. We'll save that for another segment. But just Hunter's criminality in terms of his misreporting, non-reporting, structuring his LLC so he could hide taxes, insane amounts of crimes. I think Garrett Ziegler from MarcoPoloUSA.org, the gentleman who was the lead author of this book here, communicated hundreds of different potential violations and articulated a slew of different crimes in there. But they're just form, a simple form problem, just a little minor thing, like a little misunderstanding. And certainly we'll see where this goes from here. But I have some serious issues with this. I don't trust it for a minute. I do have some initial questions about a booking, though. Is he going to get booked? Are we going to see a mugshot for old Hunter? I'd be curious to see. Is the media going to parade that around and tell us what a criminal miscreant he is and how rotten he has tainted the whole Biden family and how we should be shocked shocked about this or not? Are they just going to tuck that one under the radar? I bet it's going to be the latter. Now, I have some concerns about this as well, because we know that the impeachment inquiry is now popping up. And now that Hunter has been formally indicted and formally charged, he is going to be invoking his Fifth Amendment rights all the time. And his lawyers are going to be doing the same too. So if there's ever any, and honestly, I think that the specter of possible criminal charges, if David Weiss continues to have that sword of Damocles swinging around, is that what that is? Swinging around, who over all of Hunter's witnesses, potential witnesses or co-conspirators necks, then they're all going to say he's been indicted. Now I'm concerned that we're going to be indicted if Hunter starts spilling the beans, and so now we're not going to spill the beans either, right? So a indictment can chill everybody else from cooperating, and this is just a minor stupid indictment charge, right? So now Congress is starting to say impeachment inquiry. Right around the same time the impeachment inquiry starts, now we've got this potential of an indictment coming that's going to start chilling anybody who might think about cooperating or speaking out, lest they be indicted. And the DOJ is not going to offer them immunity in exchange to testify against Hunter, right? I would imagine. So they'll just say, nope, we can't talk to you, Congress. Sorry. If we talk to you, maybe we'll be indicted. So then Congress might have to offer them immunity, and the whole thing gets complex. But it is pressure. Also, we've talked about this immunity provision. Hunter's lawyers are claiming that he is immune, that this should not even be valid, right? We're going to see a filing on that basis, I would imagine. They're going to turn right around and they're going to say, we've already signed a diversion deal that means Hunter is immune. Now, the prosecutors, so-called, have said that that is not valid yet because the probation department did not actually sign off on it. But I think Hunter's people are going to say, yes, but Hunter, the probation approved the original deal, which is why we all started discussing it, negotiating about it, and that the signature and that Hunter's acting as though it has been agreed upon is his conversion. He's actually complying with the terms of the contract, in other words. And so he cannot be stolen. His rights cannot be stolen out from under him since he is complying with the terms. We also have the question about a speedy trial, all right? They are pushing Trump for trial in March and May of next year. Are we going to get a Hunter Biden trial before the election? Are they going to pull out all the stops to make it happen immediately? Is the DOJ going to do like Big Fanny and say we want it in October? Or are they going to tell the judge that Hunter doesn't need to read his discovery so we can have it in March or sooner? Or are they going to delay and delay and delay? Are we going to have this trial pushed out past Trump's trial for a stupid gun crime charge? Or what else could happen is if we get closer, they'll just start trickling some superseding indictments and reset the clock, right? So we'll see the gun charge come, and then the tax charge will come a little bit later, and they'll consolidate, or maybe they'll be in different courtrooms, but it'll reset the clock and then the trial calendar will get bumped back. So they'll accelerate Trump's and they'll decelerate Biden's. They're also going to now say, right, there's already this happening, that they're going to say that, see, this is the Biden DOJ being fair. See, he indicted Trump on one and now he's indicting Biden on the other one. And so everything is even-handed. Lady Justice has scales that are perfectly balanced. We all know that is total hogwash, but this will give them some cover to make that argument. Meanwhile, this indictment is really, I think, providing cover in many more ways that actually support Hunter Biden, because it's not a real serious charge that he's been charged with. And the question, of course, is, are more charges coming? Where are they coming? Is David Weiss going to think about indicting on all of the rest of these crimes, on all of this misconduct in here for Hunter? Again, we're not even talking about Biden yet, okay? Just Hunter. Is that going to happen? And where is that going to take place? In California, in District of Columbia, who knows? But this woman was on the news. She is somebody who's got experience with these types of cases, and she was asked about this.
The charges against Hunter Biden do look very similar to the charges that he'd agreed to plead guilty to a couple of months ago. Is today's indictment just another step towards another plea deal? I mean, he's functionally admitted to these acts by being at the doorstep of accepting the plea deal previously.
We certainly don't know whether this is simply a placeholder because the statute of limitations was about to expire, or whether ongoing plea negotiations are taking place. I think it's a little bit of both. At this point, David Weiss, the special counsel, has to be prepared to go in either direction. He has to be prepared to indict probably both the tax counts and this firearms case that he has now indicted. And he always has to have an open mind towards the possibility of a resolution, some type of plea deal. Whether it's a plea deal that is exactly like the one that we saw before, or whether it's one that will result in some harsher sanctions on Hunter Biden, remains to be seen. it does go towards the fact that prosecutors generally feel that the longer it takes to reach a resolution with a defendant, the harsher the penalties are going to be. So in other words, the sooner you come in the door to cut a deal, the better off you are. They don't like to set the precedent of somebody hanging on till the very end and then getting what they call a sweet deal. So that remains to be seen.
Yeah, they call that the trial tax, right? If you exercise your right to review your evidence or to negotiate or to interview the government's witness, or you're like the Proud Boys and they get plea deals for much lower sentences, but then they actually go to trial and lose the trial, and then they say, how dare you make us present our evidence? How dare you exercise your constitutional right to a trial by your peers? And then they say, well, because you've done that, now you get the trial tax. You double your penalties, and Enrique Tarrio and the rest of them get decades.
But we haven't seen any indication that the tax charges are going away. I will say that tax counts are a lot more complicated than firearms cases, generally speaking. And so it doesn't surprise me that it's taking longer for David Weiss to gather all the evidence and jump through all the hoops necessary to bring a good, solid tax case.
And they've got some deadlines. They told the judge that they would have some filings all done by the end of this month. So we don't know if they are done yet or if they're going to continue on, but we, of course, will follow as it carries forward. Now, we do have some reaction here of the Oversight Committee via James Comer, somebody who's leading part of the inquiry into Hunter and Joe and their business deals. On the Oversight Committee released a statement. He says, today's charges against Hunter are a very small start, but unless U.S. Attorney David Weiss, who is now the special counsel, unless he investigates everyone involved in the fraud schemes and the influence peddling, it will be clear President Biden's DOJ is protecting Hunter Biden and the big guy. He posted this. He says the DOJ's sweetheart plea deal fell apart after a federal hero judge called Judge Norica refused to rubber stamp it. Mountains of evidence reveals that Hunter Biden likely committed several felonies, and Americans expect the Justice Department to apply the law equally. Today's charges are a very small start, but unless U.S. Attorney Weiss investigates everyone, we know we're protecting the big guy. That's from James Comer over at the Oversight Committee. And so he's saying it's a small start. I think it's just misdirection largely. It's, it gives them cover to say Hunter's being prosecuted. Why would anything change? Why would anything change now that we know about this? They're just going to actually investigate and expand the scope of their inquiry? They're not. They were almost going to let him not plead guilty to anything. The only reason, in my opinion, why we even have criminal charges being contemplated at all is because of the hero IRS whistleblowers. They popped their heads up. They added credibility from inside the game for everybody. All the work that Marco Polo USA and many others like Miranda Devine have been doing for years on this have been validated from an inside man, 2 of them, plus FBI agents. And so now we get a speed bump in the process. And so it's nice that Comer says, yeah, hopefully David Weiss investigates everybody else. He's not going to, and we'll see that soon. Now, Donald Trump also had some reaction to this. He said, the gun charge, is the only crime that Hunter committed that does not implicate crooked Joe Biden. 1 down, 11 to go. 11 more crimes. The Democrats, with all of their horrible, very unfair, and mostly illegal witch hunts, have started a process that is very dangerous for our country. They have opened the proverbial Pandora's box. That's a phrase we use a lot here. And it is possible that the USA will never be the same again. So sad. Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. He's right about that. The country will never be the same again. And they are the ones who started it. I mean, they really came out swinging. They didn't even play around. It wasn't even like one begrudging indictment. They're like, oh gosh, we really don't want to, but like, this is just unbelievable. We have no choice. They're like, oh, 4 of them. They're like, oh, business records. Trump paid Michael Cohen some money. Boom, indictment. RICO, big fanny. Oh, let's cobble together a bunch of people. Let's indict Lindsey Graham, Perdue, Loeffler, all sorts of other people for just exercising free speech. Their psychopathic grand jury couldn't cobble together a distinction between all of these different things. So they just charged everybody, and Fannie selected who she wanted to charge. And the same thing goes on for the other 2 cases in the federal districts. Here is what Vivek had to say. Not a lot of reaction to this when I was doing show prep from other candidates. They're focused on other things. But Vivek says, today's indictment of Hunter Biden is a smokescreen. Don't fall for it. This is a fig leaf designed to deflect attention away from the real problem. The Biden family is selling out U.S. foreign policy for their own family's private financial gain. That's really what's wrong, and we must hold politicians in both major political parties when they use our foreign policy to enrich their family members. The impeachment inquiry initiated by the House against Biden is a step in the right direction, but the public shouldn't fall for the trick of diverting attention away from the true problem. It's no accident that today's indictment comes at a moment when Biden's own popularity within the Democratic Party is cratering. I predict this is the first step for the Democrat Party managerial class to pressure Joe Biden out of the race. Biden will become a sacrificial pawn in service to the deep state that wants to keep power at all costs. And I share that concern. I think that they're going to try to nuke the Biden family out of political office and replace them with somebody else. And so we'll see. And this is the first step. Now, Hunter's lawyer, his name is Abe David Lowell, new lawyer for Robert Hunter Biden, been on the case for quite some time. He sent a letter over to James Comer. He says, "Hey, James, you misspoke on Newsmax. I want a correction, sir." So before we hear what James Comer actually said, let's see what Lowell is complaining about. And this letter went over to Representative James Comer, September 13th, from Abe David Lowell, Hunter's lawyers. They say, "Okay, here, Chairperson Comer, writing you on regarding a statement that you made on Newsmax." It says, "Yeah, dear James, I write on behalf of our client Hunty Poo regarding your statement this morning, September 13th on Newsmax." So he's like writing the same morning. He's like watching Comer. Fires out a letter in which you stated, "James, we're headed to court more than likely. We've requested bank records from Hunter and Jim Biden early on, and obviously we never got a response back." We'll listen to this in a minute. "We will request those this week," says Comer. "If they do not comply with our request, then we will subpoena and no doubt, undoubtedly, head to court." So Abe, Hunter's lawyer, says, James, your statement was surprising as it ignores our prior exchanges." He says on February 8th, 2023, "Comer, you wrote to Hunter seeking records and information about him, ranging from 2009 to 2021. But in February, the very next day, we wrote back to you while pointing out the concerns about the motive and the improper basis of your request, James. I, Hunter's lawyer, specifically said to you, quote, I would offer to sit down with you and your staff, including the ranking member and his staff, to see whether Hunty has information that may inform some legitimate legislative purpose and be helpful to the committee." He's referencing his own letter that he sent previously. "I'm willing to sit down with you and I'll field your questions and I'll let you know if it's a proper legislative purpose. And then if it is, then I'll talk to Hunter about it and we'll bring him in to testify." So Hunter's lawyer says, "Comer, you never responded to that offer. For you to now go on live television and say we did not respond or ignored your committee's request is simply not true. We ask that you correct what you said, but more importantly, we remain available to have the discussion that I suggested some 7 months ago. Sincerely, your friend, Abe David Lowell, lawyer for Hunter Biden." Now, you can see he's referencing this Newsmax tweet down here, which I have pulled up, so we'll take a look at that. But you'll notice that the status has changed now. Okay, Congress was originally sending letters to Hunter saying, we have a legitimate legislative purpose. Now they don't care about their legislative purpose at all. Now it's for an impeachment inquiry purpose, which is a whole different pretext under the law. It's like they put a different power ring on and now they can do whatever they want that the ring gives them the power of or whatever. So it's a new source of authority, and that's going to change. And Congress doesn't give a rip about what Abe Lowell thinks about whether they have a legitimate legislative purpose, right? Congress says, we're Congress. We'll tell you if we have a legislative purpose or not. You just send your client in here for a conversation. And so that was the letter that went over to Comer. We'll see what he says about it. But this is the clip caused the reaction from Abe Lowell.
What happens next?
Well, we're headed to court more than likely. We've requested bank records from Hunter Biden and Jim Biden early on, and obviously we never got a response back. We will re-request those this week. If they do not comply with our request, then we will subpoena and no doubt undoubtedly head to court. Now, the impeachment inquiry gives us a tool in the toolbox when we go to court. The strategy by the Biden lawyers would be to try to stall this and to run out the clock and to hold this up in court for a year or so. What this will do is make the judge have to act faster. This demonstrates how serious we are about the concerns we have with Joe Biden. We've already made the case that his family's taken in over $20 million from some bad people in some bad countries that are adversarial to the United States, and we don't know why. Joe Biden never has come out and said exactly what his family did to earn one penny of that $21 million.
Yeah, and you used to run a bank back in Kentucky, and there are over 150 SAR, suspicious activity reports. No one's been held accountable or explained what they are and why. When are you going to subpoena Hunter Biden and drag him into Capitol Hill for questioning?
Good question, sir. Good
question.
question.
I think what I want to look at with Hunter Biden, if I could just have one thing with Hunter Biden, it would be his bank record. We see emails and text messages from the laptop where he complained to many people, including his daughter, that he had to give half his salary to his father. We have emails from Eric Sherwin, who was their bookkeeper, that would send Hunter an email saying, who's going to pay for your dad's new roof?
But Congressman, why not subpoena him and have him testify on Capitol Hill? Even if he doesn't say anything, that's going to be uncomfortable for the president to have his son testifying on the Hill.
Right. Well, when I announced the investigation early on, I said we're going to follow the money. And Hunter Biden's more than welcome to come in front of the committee. If he wants to clear his good name, if he wants to come and say, these weren't 20 shell companies, they actually did something. He's invited today. We will drop everything.
Yeah, but he's not going to volunteer to do that. We both know. But if you subpoena him, he then has to.
Well, he can fight the subpoena in court. It's very difficult. I think if it were easy to get a president or their son in front of a house, the January 6th committee probably would have done that with Donald Trump.
No, good point. Although son's different. Everyone always says Hunter Biden's a private citizen. So it's not like you're subpoenaing Joe Biden right now.
Listen, but what we found in the last few weeks is he was communicating back and forth with the government about Ukrainian policy, which is a huge problem for Joe Biden. Look, I would say we will get to the point very soon where we subpoena Hunter Biden. But at this point right now, I just want the bank records because we're following the money. And our concern is that Joe Biden was, in fact, benefiting from these schemes, from these illegal, corrupt activities of his son and brother.
Right. OK, a couple quick ones.
That's going to be interesting to see if they have those bank records. I mean, if they have the bank records and they can just move the accounts, the money, saying this went here and this went there. And you can literally, with Excel spreadsheets and charts, just connect the money. And Joe Biden's like, on a roller coaster at Disneyland or something, like, I love this life, and that was paid for with Burisma cash. That's a concern. And so maybe they don't need Hunter as much as they might otherwise suspect. But what does Joe Biden have to say about all of this? I mean, his son just got indicted. Truly historic indictment. I don't think this has ever happened in American history before. The Biden crime family should be ultra ashamed and shocked about this. Joe Biden is wrecking American democracy, and here is what he looks like on the news of this indictment.
Mr. President! Mr. President! Mr. President, you have a platform full of reporters. Mr. President, you have a evidence for your son today.
All right, not much interest in answering questions. She's lobbing questions at him. They're like, just turn the music up. Just turn it up. All right, drown that out. Okay, pipe down, lady. All right, so that is the latest. Hunter indicted. Now, I think it's mostly a scam. Of course, we're going to continue to cover it. We'll see what Judge Norika has to say about this. Should still be in her courtroom. And so we'll have updates and more, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we continue to cover this one, and for subscribing and for sharing this video with a friend or family member, telling them we're covering this thing in depth. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.